Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. On Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Beautiful soul, are you yearning for sacred community? Now more than ever, women are being called to gather in sacred circle for connection, community, and transformation. If your soul is shouting yes, and you yearn to come together for live circles twice a month with other women on the path of self-discovery, while also having access to a transformational curriculum of over 50 masterclasses taught by leading visionaries, then you'll feel right at home on the soul-nourishing virtual campus of Inspired Living University. Now listen, the doors only open a few times a year, so you want to be sure you're on the wait list. You can do so at inspiredlivinguniversity.com. And I want to thank everyone for circling up with me today for this episode of Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, Mindset Elevation Coach, Intentional Living Guide, and publisher of Aspire Magazine. I am really excited to be having a conversation today that I think is so important for so many, especially for women. And we're going to be talking about releasing the shame and guilt and making peace with food in your body, especially after a history of trauma, which I can relate to. Diane Petrella is joining me today to help you understand that emotional eating is not a lack of willpower, my friends. She'll be offering practices to soothe your emotions without turning to food, and befriend and support your body, and connect with your inner wisdom for ongoing guidance. Diane is a clinical social worker and holistic licensed psychotherapist, specializing in the effects of childhood trauma, emotional eating, and body confidence. Early in her nearly 40-year career, she co-developed the first child sexual abuse treatment program in the state of Rhode Island. She has helped thousands of people overcome early trauma, create a respectful relationship with their body and food, and connect with their inner wise self for sustained healing. I'm honored she's written articles for Aspire Magazine, and I love her book. It is called Healing Emotional Eating for Trauma Survivors. Trauma-informed practices to nurture a peaceful relationship with your emotions, body, and food. You can get more details at dianepetrella.com, and that's Diane Petrella, Petrella.com. Diane, thank you, my friend, for joining me for this important conversation.
Oh, Linda, thank you very much. I'm really, truly honored to be here and to talk about something that's very important issue that I know affects a lot of people. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. And I got to tell you, you've been in your career is over 40 years old. You're a leader in this whole, I guess, making the healing of sexual abuse and tying it into the issues that follow with food. You
Hmm.
tell you what led you to this work, because it's mind-blowing to me that you were one of the first ones to actually create such an important treatment center in Rhode Island.
Yeah. When I even say it and then I hear it from other people nearly 40 years, it's sort of shocking to think 40 years? But yeah, it's that long and whatever. I started early in my career as well. I guess that's part of it, but I was originally trained as a social worker. I was originally trained as a child psychotherapist. I always loved working with children. And my early experiences as a student in social work school was with um, one of my clinical internships was with abused and neglected children. And it was just such powerful, rewarding work. And that led to that first, as I mentioned, the first job was at a child psychiatric hospital in Rhode Island and in an outpatient department. And it was to build, and this was in the mid 80s at this point, where not a lot, it was just beginning to be um, acknowledged that sexual abuse of children, in fact, happens. And it was just wonderful work. I really enjoyed, I no longer work with children or teens. I do only work with adults at this point. But that early experience of, I worked with children, adolescents, I worked with adult survivors of sexual abuse, and that expanded to all forms of trauma as well. I worked with all family members, and I will say I ran a sexual offender group for nearly 10 years, working with fathers and stepfathers who would sexually abuse their children and stepchildren. And I also was a court appointed expert witness. So a lot of my early experience was with children, and it was just work that I loved. And I'll often get the question of, wasn't that hard to do that? And honestly, mostly no, it wasn't. I was a solution to a problem these kids were having, and I was helping them. So I always felt that it was just very important and rewarding work. And the only thing that would keep me up at night was when I was involved in some court situations. And I thought children may be put back into dangerous situations that I knew they were going to be at risk, and there wasn't much more I could do because of the way systems operate and parental rights and all of that. But that's another story. But that's how it started. And during the time of working in this program and consulting with other agencies, and it was really very um, involved work and comprehensive for about the first 15 years or so of my practice. But I began meeting with people, children, adolescents, and at this point, a lot of adult survivors of various forms of trauma who had struggles with all forms of addiction, but particularly food. And at the same time, I was working with a very astute dietitian, registered dietitian, who was seeing a lot of her clients who were coming to her because they wanted to lose weight. She was very aware of psychological issues. And as she dug deeper, she discovered that many of them experienced some form of childhood trauma, not all sexual abuse, but some form of trauma or other adverse experience. Um, and I say that because not all trauma is abuse. There can be other adverse or traumatic experiences that aren't necessarily because of abuse. It could be death and divorce and having family members with addictions or depression. But in any event, it became clear that the struggles her clients were dealing with wasn't about following a right diet plan or having to count calories, or they were lacking willpower. It had nothing to do with that. So early on, I learned about the connection between trauma and using food and, obviously other kinds of substances or behaviors for coping. But it led to primarily working with people who used food in that way to cope with the physiological and emotional effects of early trauma and how that stays inside of us until we're able to process those feelings, deal with the pain, address the impact of the trauma, and then be able to move forward and find other ways to cope instead of numbing feelings with food.
And that is so important that you identify that in all that work that you have done. And we're going to take our first break, Diane, because I don't want to interrupt this next important section. So
Sure.
we're going to be back in a moment with my friends. I invite you to visit dianepetrella.com, grab a copy of her book available on her website as well as Amazon and other online retailers. It's called Healing Emotional Eating for Trauma Survivors. Trauma-informed practices to nurture a peaceful relationship with your emotions, body, and food. And we'll be back in a moment, my friends.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Inspiration for a Woman's Soul. Aspire Magazine, inspiring and supporting women on the path of self-discovery. Claim your free digital subscription today, which includes access to thousands of dollars of personal development bonus gifts from Team Inspiration partners. Claim your Aspire magazine subscription today at subscribetoaspire.com.
Consistently attract soulmate clients, begin showing up on brand, monetizing on your calling. Welcome all spiritual coaches, leaders, healers, light workers, and practitioners to a show that turns you on in your business and amplifies your magnetism. I'm host, catalyst, and spiritual business coach Rosalind Fung, and I'm here to journey with you into the juicy and help you discover where the real gaps are. Ignite your mindset and soul with strategies and systems as each episode takes you to the sweet spot that activates your soulgasmic business by tuning in on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Mountain. Join me for your light language activation and let's magnetize and monetize.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. This is Linda Joy, your host, and with me today is Diane Petrella, clinical social worker and holistic licensed psychotherapist, specializing in the effects of childhood trauma, emotional eating, and body confidence. So that's back then you just shared how you started to notice that connection between early trauma and emotional eating. What are some of the ways that people may be soothing themselves when they're stressed? What are some of the ways they can do it without turning to food?
Without turning to food. Sure. One of the things I talk about is to create what I call a self-care basket or self-love basket. So to develop and discover what are those tools that help you cope when you're feeling stressed. And so to back up a little bit, um, when we're feeling stressed, especially when there's a history of childhood trauma, it's as if, our body holds early trauma until it's been processed and released. And even when we've gone through a process of healing, it doesn't mean we're not going to be triggered again. You still may, and that's okay. Once you've been able to discover some ways of calming the body, soothing yourself, mentally, emotionally. One of the best things people, and I'll get back to what I talked about a self-care basket, but one of the best things people can do is to practice using your breath and learn what's called diaphragmatic breathing, which is for people who may be doing yoga or other kinds of practices may call that belly breathing or abdominal breathing, where you're really getting the full benefit and how the breath oxygenates the blood and body to produce a sense of calm. And that's taking deeper, shallower breaths, like a bellows. As you breathe in, your belly may expand, it expands, and as you contract, as you're breathing in, it expands like a bellows, and as you're exhaling, it contracts. And there are lots of places online people can learn how to use diaphragmatic breathing. And that's one of the ways in which your body will calm itself when you're able to take those deeper breaths, because one physiological sign of being stressed is when we take shorter, shallower breaths, that kind of, and even more rapid breathing. So when you're able to learn how to breathe diaphragmatically, there are lots of different breathing exercises that are really wonderful and powerful and can help calm the body down and calm that physiological stress response. But when you learn to breathe diaphragmatically, that helps make those breathing exercises all the more powerful. And one other simple way of using the breath is it's called four-step breathing or box breathing, where you breathe in to the count of 4, could be any number. I use 4 because that's fairly easy for people. Breathe in to the count of 4, hold the breath to the count of 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold the breath, 2, 3, 4, and go through that several times. That's one of the first things people can do when they notice that they're stressed and agitated and maybe wanting to grab something to eat, in an impulsive way because that's what they may be used to doing. So start by breathing. The other thing that would be useful to do, especially with how stress and earlier traumatic stress can be activated and stored in the body, is to do something physical, if possible, depending on where you are. That could be a simple walk. It could be even for 5 minutes. If you're home and you can't leave, maybe you do some physical cleaning, vacuum, scrub a bathtub, to do something physical. If you can, maybe just walk in place, but to do something physical. And then I talk about creating what's called a self-care basket. You find, which is simply that you get a beautiful basket or box and think of the things in the past that have been useful when you felt stressed, overwhelmed, upset, sad, frustrated, despairing. What might those things be? Perhaps that's where you put a journal to write down and express your thoughts and feelings on paper, to get them out of your head, through your arm, into your hand, on a piece of paper, by writing down what's going on. Maybe you have a list as well of people to call that are supports in your life, to take a moment and reach out for someone for help. Maybe it's a box of herbal teas that you can remember to use because they're in your basket. It's like, oh, tea, I'll take a 10-minute tea break to try calming down. Perhaps it's, some of those fidgets where you buy those like squeeze balls or something like that to just use in your hands if you're feeling anxious. That can just express or be an opportunity or a way to kind of take that stress from your body and use a squeeze ball or some other kind of what's called fidget. Maybe it's getting a shawl that you wrap yourself up. In my book, I talk about a process I call your sacred shawl. And it's a process where you get a shawl, um, either a new one that's beautiful that you want to have just for this purpose, or something that you already own, or it could also just be a sweater or a shirt, but something that's designated for this purpose. And you first start by blessing it. And by blessing, I mean you put it on and you imagine whatever your higher power means to you, whatever that may be, whether it's God, whether it's nature, whether it's consciousness. Imagine that as you're wrapping yourself in this shawl or jacket or sweater, that you're being hugged by that higher power. And you first bless that shawl or jacket by saying, dear higher power, or what I call wise self, please bless this shawl or jacket with your love and support. When I feel scared, help me feel safe. When I feel upset, help me feel at peace. So you're asking your higher power or wise self to infuse this shawl with its love and support and encouragement. So then once you do that, you can have this shawl, wrap it around you when you're feeling stressed, because it's also a way of, imagine hugging yourself. What we know through self-compassion research, that a hug from others, while that can be soothing, it's also a soothing and calming to our what's called parasympathetic nervous system, can activate the calming properties in our body to give ourselves a hug. And the added benefit of imagining that when you're wrapping yourself in that shawl or sweater, that you're not alone. Your higher power, a higher being, inner being, is with you as well. That's a powerful tool or resource people can create for themselves and put in their box. Other things in the box could be um, a magazine, just a mindless magazine. Maybe it's a book of prayers. So to look at what has been helpful in the past and put this in your box so that when you're feeling stress and you're at home, this can also be something you take with you by having a bag of a few things. Oh, maybe it's also like a crewel or needlepoint or small knitting project that you have in there, or a box of a small jigsaw puzzle to start working on, because when we focus on our mind on one thing, like a stitch, like a puzzle, or a word game, we're getting out of our head in those stress-based and perhaps trauma-based thoughts and thinking, and we're focused on something else, and that actually can help calm the nervous system down. When you're stressed, it's hard to know what to do or how to manage it or how to deal with these unsettling sensations in the body that often are rooted in early trauma and stay in our body. So it may be very easy to grab something to eat because for those who struggle with this, they know that eating a kind of comfort food or salty, sugary, sweet type of food can help calm the body down. Um, and when that's your default mode of responding, it's helpful to have a go-to box or basket where you don't have to think. You can just look in your box and take something that may resonate in the moment. There was somebody I was working with who, when I talked with her about this, she said, I bought a cup of herbal tea. I can't remember what, say it was chamomile tea, because she knows that when she has a cup of tea and takes a tea break, it's very calming. She says, I never think of using it. I'll put that in my box. So having a go-to resource helps you not have to think about what to do. All you have to think about, you notice you're stressed, do the best you can to remember to breathe, and go to your box or bag if it's with you at work or in your car. So I
I
think
think
that's helpful for people.
that's very helpful, and I love the sacred shawl. Um, I believe you wrote about that for an article in Aspire Mag when that's the first time I saw that teaching of yours.
Oh, that's
That
right.
just,
That's right.
yes, and that just resonates with me and how I believe. And one of the things I was envisioning as you were speaking, like, oh, I wonder what would be in my box. And one of the things is one of those herbal shoulder packs that you put in the microwave in heat.
Oh,
I have a giant one. I call it my binky. I live with that thing every day.
I
But I
don't
would,
know. I don't think I know what that
oh
is.
my goodness, Diane, I have got all my clients hooked on it. It's an actual, it's usually made out of flannel, sometimes other fabrics, and it's filled with seeds and lavender and beads and different things, and it holds heat, and roll it up, put it in the microwave, and it's like a warm hug. Dana and I each have one. I have two actually. I call it my binky. I am heating it up 5, 6, 7 times a day. I go to sleep with it. It's soothing. So
Oh, that sounds amazing. And if
I'm
people,
gonna tell you when
yeah.
my granddaughter is gonna be 13, and I think she was in 5th grade. She was having a tough year. She's an honors student, but it was an emotionally tough year. And we got her one, and Nikki said she would just pop it in the microwave and just go curl up after school with it for a little while, and it just grounded her back into her truth.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
really beautiful.
yeah, it's funny because Nikki, back when McKenna was probably 10, she's gonna be 13. I think she called it can't remember now, a hug box. And
Oh,
it was small, those things you buy from Michael's, pretty boxes, that you can buy and with the covers. She did something like that so McKenna could always go to it. But what I loved as you were sharing all this is there's so many ways that we can soothe ourselves.
yeah.
And you named so many, the breathing is a big one for me. I was always a really shallow breather because I'm a trauma survivor. And it took me a long time to learn how to like fully take in life, fully take in air. And I noticed that in a lot of conversations, they said, real shallow breath. And believe that's from, the years of trauma when I was a child. And so we're going to take our next break, and when we come back, let's talk about some things that could help someone who feels body shame and insecurity, which I now see in younger people. I had it when I was young, but I'm seeing it magnified now with social media and all that. So I
Yeah.
know you have some great tips and strategies. So we'll be back in a moment, my friends. Please stay with us. And I invite you too to write down dianepetrella.com and the title of her book, Healing Emotional Eating for Trauma Survivors. Be sure to grab a copy, and we'll be back in a moment.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM.
Your worth is not determined by the number on the scale. You are enough right now, exactly as you are. If you're like many midlife women, you've thought, if I could just reach my ideal weight, I'd be so much happier. What we're really craving is our own love and acceptance and Sarah Haas is that guide for your journey. Sarah is a women's weight release expert and body love coach and walks alongside midlife women ready to say yes to self-care, self-compassion, and body love so they can become the healthy, vibrant, and unapologetically confident women they're here to be. Her holistic approach integrates nutrition, body movement, and self-care to nurture body, mind, and spirit. Visit sarahhaaswellness.com for supportive resources, programs, and more for midlife women ready to reclaim their health.
If I could be you,
and you could be me for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Times Radio, IOM FM.
Thanks for being here, my friends. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. With me is Diane Petrella, clinical social worker and holistic licensed psychotherapist, and author of the transformational book, Healing Emotional Eating for Trauma Survivors. So right before the break, I said we would come back and talk about some of the things that could help if someone is feeling body shame and insecurity. I mean, you can't have a conversation with a girlfriend these days where they're judging some aspect of their body. And I was there, and sometimes can still fall back. Can we talk about that, Diane? Because it's pervasive.
Sure, I know it really is. And when somebody struggles with emotional eating, body insecurity may be what I call a complementary challenge with that. Not that everybody who struggles with emotional eating has that same issue, but many people do. And even people who don't struggle with emotional eating may have a lot of body shame or whatnot because of, like you said, social media, as wonderful as it can be, can wreak havoc. And, I think we all know there's research on that in terms of teens. But, and I talk about this in my book, we'll maybe perhaps be able to briefly go through 3 practices that I suggest. And the first one that I think is so important is when people have been feeling disconnected from their bodies, which can happen with body shame and body insecurity. And, one of the things I talk about, I'm going to circle around this in a different way, is that there's a lot of talk about body positivity. And that is important. I certainly don't discount that. But sometimes, many times, it's hard to feel positive about your body if you don't. It may feel hard to be able to say positive things if that's simply not how you feel. So instead of trying to force yourself to feel something that you don't feel, I talk about adopting what I call a body supportive approach. So that even if you don't feel positive about your body, I think we can all agree that it's important to support our bodies because our bodies need us to take good care of it for our health and well-being. It is the vehicle through which we are in this life. And it helps us have a rich life when our bodies function well and are vibrant and as healthy as they can be. One way so I talk about, body supportive approach. And you don't have to wait until you love your body to start treating it lovingly today. Try to make that separation. You don't love your body? You don't like your body? That's okay. But can you give it love? Can you treat it lovingly? Will you treat it lovingly? Will you give it your love? That's the question to ask. And I think most people want to. We have a real relationship with our body, whether we're connected to it or detached from it. And that relationship is as real as a relationship we may have with a person. And when it's a detached relationship, think of somebody you may have a love-hate relationship with or an antagonistic relationship. That's really tough when that's the quality of the attachment we have with our bodies. One thing I work with clients around, and I talk about this in my book. In fact, for those who are interested in my book, there are 4 guided imagery links that are free there's a link in there. There are 4 audios. I meant 2 relaxation audios and progressive muscle relaxation, but also a guided imagery exercise to connect with your wise self, and another one to connect with your body wisdom. And I can walk people briefly through that right now. And it's basically getting yourself in a comfortable position, getting quiet in a safe, comfortable place. If you can close your eyes, do that. And I don't necessarily mean right now, hear this first and then practice on your own. Some people may have a hard time closing their eyes, especially when they've been traumatized or when the trauma might have been abuse, and closing eyes may trigger a level of vulnerability. That's okay too. If that's hard, you could just put your gaze downwards, or get in that soft eye sort of focus where you're just gently closing your eyes. If you can't completely, that's okay. But do the best you can to tune into your body in whatever way that means to you. Just draw your attention inwards, and believing and trusting that there's an inner wisdom that our bodies hold, which is our intuition. We can access that intuition in lots of different ways. Connecting with our body is one of them. So you go inside and simply ask this question: what do you need from me today so that you will feel loved and well cared for? And then just listen. Allow whatever thoughts or images may enter your mind, if any. And if nothing does, that's okay. If something does, as it does for some people, they'll hear a whisper of their intuition suggesting they do something, or a thought might enter their mind, or an image may enter their mind. That could be taking a rest. That could be sitting down and reading something because you've been on high drive all day. Maybe it's to eat a certain kind of food. Maybe it's to take a walk. Who knows what it is? Only you and your body know what it needs. And even if you don't hear anything, keep asking. Our bodies are always communicating to us when we take the time to listen, and when we take the time to learn its language. And the way we do that is just by asking the question, little by little, over time. If this is new, for those who this may be new, keep asking. Trust that your body will begin to communicate more and more to you about what it needs. And when you hear what your body needs, trust what you're hearing. And just like if you ask a friend if they would do you a favor and they say, sure, I will, you want them and expect them to follow through. You'd be feeling disappointed if they don't. So follow through with what you hear from your body. It needs you to give it what it needs. So when it's letting you know that, do the best you can to be a good caretaker for your body. So that's one thing I'd suggest. Just tuning in, eyes open or closed. And when you feel disconnected from your body, it may be hard to close your eyes and tune within, but just keep asking the question. You will start getting answers over time. Another
Mm,
thing.
yeah. Well, I just wanted to share one thing.
Yeah.
Just as guiding through that, it was so beautiful. And as someone that's had to learn to reconnect with the body over the last 40 years, because I was so disconnected from it, from the trauma, everything that you were teaching just now and guiding us through, I could feel myself just dropping back into my body. So
Oh,
yeah, I could feel it. So I thought that was beautiful. And if you have something short that you could share before our next break, it sounded like you were going to share another
yeah.
quick one.
I'll try to make this one quick. What I talk about doing as well is giving your body a daily gift. And what I mean by that is designating one thing during the day that you say is the gift you're going to give to your body. For example, the gift could be something you do every day. Your gift could be a glass of drinking water. But in that moment, you're saying to your body, this is so good for you, or this is good for us. You can say in the third person, you could say joining as if it's good for us, because it is obviously your body. You could just say it as if you're talking to your body. Either way is okay. I know sometimes people have asked me that question. It could be something extra special, like you're going to schedule a massage or, a facial, but it doesn't have to be that, although that's great too. It could be flossing your teeth, brushing your teeth. It could be going out in sunshine for 10 minutes of vitamin D. It could be eating a certain kind of vegetable or fruit or something your body would like. It could be rest, but the point is that you give yourself, I suggest people start with a week, and you're giving your body a gift every single day. Again, even if it's something you do every day, and talk to your body. So you are communicating with it and letting it know that you're doing this special thing for it or this loving thing for it. Again, even if it's something you do all the time, but it's a moment where you're taking time to tell your body essentially how much you value and appreciate it. And then when you begin to have this be a regular, I suggest to people that after doing this for a week, you make a month of daily gifts and keep track of it. It can be a fun thing to do. And, Linda, we see what we look for. So when you make a commitment to give your body a daily gift, you're going to start seeing things that you can give to your body that you may not have seen before, even something, say, very simple that a lot of people may do anyway. Say if you need to do some movement, you'll park further away from a door entrance, or you start thinking, when I'm parking here, you know what, rather than parking by the door, I'll park further back. Walking will be my gift to my body today. So think about it that way too. We see what we look for. When you start intending to give your body a daily gift, you'll start seeing ways in which you can give to your body. And that can help people develop a kinder, more gentler connection, a more appreciative connection with their bodies as well.
I was even thinking of one thing that came to mind as you were sharing that. Even like a beautiful high quality hand cream and just rubbing it in your skin and being in that moment with that scent. That's what came to mind for me too. And we're going to take our final break, Diane, and come back for the last segment. And I have a couple questions about emotional eating, and we'll cover that in our final segment, my friends. So stay with us and visit Diane at dianepetrella.com, and you'll find her book, Healing Emotional Eating for Trauma Survivors, on our website, as well as Amazon and other online retailers. We'll be back in a moment, my friends.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Times Radio. FM.
You don't have to identify as a creative to reap the benefits of a daily creativity practice. Even 15 minutes a day offers a wealth of benefits to your emotional, physical, social, and spiritual well-being. As a natural-born teacher and facilitator, Cindy Winsell consciously merges her 35 years as an educator with her in-depth training as a certified creative depth coach, certified Zentangle teacher, soul collage facilitator, journey circles facilitator, and moon circles guide to empathically and joyfully guide women to tap into their creativity through expressive arts as tools for healing and transformation. Cindy works with women ready to step into creative exploration as a tool for healing. Together, you will develop your own exciting insights and approaches that will help you awaken to possibility. Visit cindywinsell.com for creative classes and more.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No. I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Free your mind with Om Times Radio, IOM FM.
Welcome back. You're listening to Inspired Conversations. I'm your host, Linda Joy, and I'm with my friend Diane Petrella, and we are talking about healing emotional eating for trauma survivors. She's been sharing so many tips and strategies to support you. And one of the questions I had, because when we hear emotional eating, I tend to think that it usually means overeating, right? But in my case, my food trauma issues when I was young was undereating, which was a feeling of control, of course, of what I could put into my body. So describe emotional eating so that others that may be like me really understand it.
Yeah. And you made a good point that it's not always, quote, overeating. It might be eating more than what is comfortable for your body to feel. Sometimes people may use food to the point where they enter what some people call a food coma, so to speak, where they've eaten so much that they're numbed out to whatever it is emotionally that they were dealing with, and they're just kind of in this numbed out body coma state. That's perhaps may seem like a more extreme, but not everybody who uses food to cope is necessarily, quote, overeating. And that's all unique to, what does that really mean? It's unique to each person as to what feels comfortable with their bodies. But it may also just mean turning to food to cope with stress, anger, sadness, despair. And look, I also want to say that in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with this. We all just want to cope and feel better when we're distressed in the moment. And I want your listeners to hear that. This isn't there's no need for shame and guilt. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just doing the best you can to cope. And if that's your default way of coping, you're going to keep doing that until you learn some other ways. One of the things that happens though, when you use food or any substance or behavior, whether the behavior is shopping or gambling, when you're using food to cope, then you're not really dealing with the issue at hand. You're not really addressing, perhaps if somebody is stressed about a difficult interaction with their boss or a colleague or coworker or something, and they're going to the office lunchroom, or these days working from home, the kitchen, wherever that may be, and you're using food and you're upset, and it might help calm your body down for a moment, or you're eating your anger away. Sometimes the more you do that, and then the food might kind of calm or settle things down in the moment. What it does sometimes do is it gets in the way of people learning the skills that they need to learn that prompted the stress to happen in the first place. For example, if food is your go-to, go-to behavior, rather than setting boundaries, you're not learning to set boundaries and deal with a conflict at the moment. If you're avoiding a difficult conversation with somebody and turning to food because it's too hard to think about disappointing someone, or if someone may be angry with you, whatever the reasons are, and many of them that keep people from addressing a problem with someone else, then food becomes the focus rather than addressing what the deeper problem or issue might be. If people are nighttime eating because they're alone, lonely, or sad, they're not necessarily dealing with the sadness and letting them feel what they need to feel, or the grief that might be underneath that. Because then what happens when people use food, most likely, often, people then beat themselves up for turning to food. And then if they worry about how that impacts their body or their weight, that's where a lot of the shame or guilt comes in. How could I have done that? Look what I ate. That's more calories. And so then food And the behavior of eating becomes the focus oftentimes, rather than dealing with the underlying sadness or anger or whatever the original triggering event may have been. The shift often happens towards food in one's body after an episode of emotional eating. I hope that's clear what I'm saying. So that
Yeah.
it may not be about how much someone is eating, although it is. Sometimes it can be if your body is then uncomfortable. But really what happens is that it's getting in the way of dealing with making changes in one's life that might be more effective. As I said, whether that's setting boundaries, standing up for oneself, um, dealing with a difficult relationship or a soul-sucking job, or whatever the life changes may need to be. When you're focusing on food and then the effects of emotional eating, it kind of stops the deeper healing from happening.
That's powerful. And, as you were speaking, I was thinking of all the emotions over the years. And I feel so blessed that I was able to heal that. And I want to invite everyone to, this is a big conversation. It's a deep conversation. And you're listening because maybe the topic pulled you in, and maybe you're ready to start the healing journey, right? Whether it's about emotional eating, past trauma. And I really want to invite you. I believe there are no accidents. You're here. Please give yourself the gift of picking up the book by Diane, Healing Emotional Eating for Trauma Survivors. She teaches trauma-informed practices in there that will help you nurture this peaceful relationship with your emotions, body, and food. And I also just want to add a personal note. Many of you have been following my brands for years. If I hadn't healed the weight of my trauma from childhood, I couldn't be the light I am in the world. I couldn't be having this conversation and shining a spotlight on amazing visionaries like Diane. When we heal, our families heal, our communities heal, the world heals. But it all begins with us. And when I got that, and 62 this weekend, my friends, I was 30 years old when I had my dark night of the soul and realized I had to stop choosing healing as my next step. And I want that gift for each of you. And again, that's DianePetrella.com. Go ahead, Diane. We have a few minutes left, so we got to be conscious of
I'd
the
like
time.
to, as we're end on this too, with the importance of self-compassion. That kind of dovetails what you're talking about. Because the other thing for people who struggle with this, that's so important to understand, that ending or healing emotional eating, the key to this is it's not about ending and stopping emotional eating for good. Healing emotional eating is how you handle it when you do emotionally eat. It's about ending the guilt, ending the self-blame, ending the beating up on yourself. Because when you treat yourself with love and compassion and acceptance, like, okay, all right, say you ate a whole pizza one night because you were lonely. That's okay. You're doing the best you can. And to say that to yourself, I'm still learning. I'm still moving forward. I'm still doing the best I can to cope. I'll learn other ways. It's how you handle it after an episode of emotional eating is more important than the food and whether or not you ate, because you're perhaps undoing years of earlier traumatic experiences of a lack of compassion towards you or a lack of safe connections. And you can give that to yourself. I often say to people that healing isn't about never being triggered. Maybe in the beginning of a process of healing, you're triggered not 80, 90, or 95% of, or 100% of the time, and you're using food to cope 80, 90, or 100% of the time. But after a process of healing, it may get down to 10 or 20 or 30% of the time you're triggered and you may use food. So what? You can live successfully with that. If it's 10, 20, or 30% of the time in your life, things don't have to go away completely to heal from them. It's how you handle it when you do use food that makes all the difference. So be gentle with yourselves and bring doses of self-compassion into your life, because this isn't about the food. It is about healing early trauma, and it's a smoother road when you bring love and compassion to that road of healing, rather than the self-blame and beating oneself up.
I think that's the most powerful message we could leave our listeners with, Diane, is having self-compassion. I am so grateful that you were able to join me today. I'm grateful that you wrote an article for Aspire, and I know this book is having a ripple effect of healing on women's lives. So thank you, my friend. And I want to give everyone an opportunity again to visit DianePetrella.com, grab a copy of her book, stay connected with her. And Diane, thank you, my friend.
Oh, Linda, thank you very much. This was delightful. I'm honored to be here. It's always wonderful to connect with you and talk with you. And certainly people can reach out to me if they have any questions about anything we've talked about today. My email is diane@dianepetrella.com.
Oh, thank you for that sacred invitation. And until next time, my friends, choose love, choose joy, choose happiness. Blessings, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy. Join our sacred space every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern and meet leading female visionaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. Inspired Conversations with Linda Joy is a soulful venue where guests share the obstacles they've overcome, along with wisdom and lessons learned on their personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic and soulful living.